Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be. This is the Groovy Podcast. This is episode 52, I believe, which I think is season 2, episode 3, something like that, or I don't know. I've got it all labeled, but I wanted to do a special podcast. My name is Ken Cousin. I am podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut, but I'm joined today by two people, one of whom is...
My name is Sergio del Amo. I am podcasting from Guadalajara, close to Madrid, in the center of Spain.
And we also have...
My name is Zachary Klein, and I'm coming out of St. Louis, Missouri, not too far away from the OCI mothership.
Wonderful. So we have Sergio del Amo and Zachary Klein, both from OCI. And of course, the big topic of conversation that we're going to want to cover is the more recent Greach conference that held in Madrid. What was that, March 16th and 17th, I believe?
On the 15th. So there was a workshop day. So it's always like a 3-day conference. There are like two regular talks day and one workshop day.
That's right. You actually did the Grails tutorial at Greach. Is that right?
We had a training before Greach, the 2 days before. So I was doing a training just before Greach, a Grails training. We have been doing that in the last GRConf EU, I think in the US as well, and also Greach last year. I did a workshop in the first day of the workshop days in the conference about Grails security, and a talk on Friday.
So you did a talk about Grails security, and
I did a workshop about Grails security and a talk about mapping a tree with Gorm, which is mostly SQL. Believe it or not.
Okay, I did actually sit through the webinar. You did a webinar recently for OCI.
We did a webinar with Marcin just 10 days before Greach, which was related to Jeb. My beloved Jeff, but that was not covered in Greach. Actually, I believe there was no Jeff talk in Greach.
Which is ironic, given that you were there and so many others. How did the tutorial go? By the way, the training, I should say, that was the Grails training well attended? Did you have a lot of interest?
We have a dozen people, more or less. So actually, we usually offer a big discount for Greach attendees. And we have many people from Europe who actually not all of them stayed for Greach. So next year we probably need to do a better job evangelizing the conference, because Madrid normally has really good flight connections in Europe. So if you are really into the Groovy Grails ecosystem, it's a really nice conference to attend.
How many attendees did you have this time?
I think this year Greach had roughly the same as last year, so I think around 120, something like that. Greach renews itself every year. So this year, actually, we were missing some of the usual suspects. So Bart Beckwith was not here, who has been attending for the past, I think, 6 years. He missed it this year. Also, Andres Almiray was not here also, which has been coming a lot of times. Skank was not here as well. But more or less like every year, like 40% of the attendees are new to the conference and 60% are regulars. There are several firms in Madrid area who uses Grails and Groovy related technologies. So many times it's attended for those developers.
Now, are you involved on the organizational side at all, or do you simply speak at the conference?
No, the conference is organized by Ivan Lopez and Alberto Vilches. I just help them with the mobile phone applications, but they carry all the conference weight. So I actually first started working with Grace due to this conference. So this conference is like half an hour with the car from where I live. Mm. So I actually was not aware about Grace existence or anything, and I was one day drinking beers, and they told me, yeah, you should come to this conference, because I was actually at that time I was working with Strats.
Ah,
So imagine how I felt the first time I saw Grace was like, wow. And yeah, they told me to attend. I attended, and I have been working with Grace since. So I have actually a kind of a sweet spot for Greach.
wonderful. I mean, the conference itself has a sparkling reputation, of course, and is quite well known within the Groovy community, in the Grails community. One of its primary features, of course, is that it's so low cost. And of course, everybody wants to come to Madrid if you're able to. Forgive my accent. I'm going to try to get some of these things right, but I'm an American, so there's no guarantee at all.
Madrid was well pronounced.
Well, I noticed that a couple of people were not able to be there, but you did have Graham Roche. You did have from the pictures on the site. You've got Paul King as well doing his Groovy update. Let us know what's going on in the Groovy ecosystem, and of course our old friend Dirk Koenig was.
Yeah, that was awesome. So I was like, for me, that was one of the highlights for me of the conference. So it's tough to see him around in the conference circuits. So actually, there was one guy who got a signed copy of Groovy in Action, second edition, with both Paul and Dirk, and they were joking that was the only copy signed by both of them in the world.
Wonderful, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to have a copy of that. Of course, these days it's hard to sign a digital ebook, but we'll figure something out.
No, that was a physical thick book.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah, I was always thinking that we'd have to set up some kind of digital signature for the digital books or whatever. Some kind of encryption mechanism or something. I should also say hi to Zach. Now, do you go by Zach or Zachary? What do you prefer?
Oh, I'm flexible, but I go by Zach quite often.
Now, for those who are not aware, Zach, in addition to his work at OCI, is a part of a family of Grails developers. You have others in the family who also are active in the community and in the ecosystem. Do you want to say anything about them, or do you want me to?
So my dad, Dave Klein, wrote the book Grails: A Quick Start Guide for the Pragmatic Programmer publishing outfit, and then my brother Benjamin Klein revised the book a couple years back. So we've Groovy and Grails is kind of running the family. My dad was an early adopter, and that's kind of how I got my start in development in general.
So for Grails 2, a quick start guide, for those who are not aware, not only is that one of the best beginner books on Grails ever, that's probably one of the best beginner books on anything ever. I love that book. It was really, really well done. And the update that was done with Ben was also very, very good. I expect there'll be another update at some point as well. How did you get involved in Grails yourself? How did you wind up working, in this community at all in general?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, my dad was a pretty early adopter. He was a senior Java developer for quite a while, and really caught on to Grails quite early. And so all the first Grails and Groovy books, they all showed up at our house. And my parents homeschooled us, and so I actually just started going there. My dad worked for the state of Wisconsin, and I would go in to work with him, and I'd sit in a cafe, my brother and I, and we would work through programming lessons that our dad would assign us.
Wow.
And so a lot of the work that went into Grails Quick Start Guide kind of came out of some of those early training sessions with our dad. And he really is an excellent teacher, and so that was partially where that came from. So I went into independent consulting, just kind of doing small jobs for folks I knew, and then started landing more substantial gigs. Worked a bit with Tim Berglund on some Grails stuff back in the day. And then in 2015, I believe, so I've been doing Groovy and Grails on my own for about 5 years. Got a call from Jeff Brown. My dad, Dave Klein, had just signed on with OCI, and so they were looking into growing the team, and that's how I got in. And since joining OCI, it's been a kind of a roller coaster, but I've been able to get much more involved as far as contributing to either the framework or some of the surrounding the surrounding ecosystem. So it's been fun. I've been really excited, and yeah, it doesn't look like there's no signs of things slowing down yet. So.
Well, that's probably going to lead us to our segue to the big topic. So what are you working on?
The elephant in the room.
Pardon me?
The elephant in the room, right?
Yes, of course. So what are you working on these days, which I imagine is going to connect to our big topic from Greach?
Yeah, well, a number of us in varying degrees are working on the Micronaut front. And so I've been doing some stuff there, some documentation, as well as some feature development. And yeah, so we're working on a new framework.
Sergio, are you also working on the framework, or are you doing other unrelated things at OCI?
I am doing various things as well as Zach. So Zach work on the Vue profile, which we released in Grace 333 the week before Greach. So that's another big part that Zach has been working on.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a little bit of that got garbled. What profile did you mention?
So we released I really don't know the pronunciation. It's Vue.js.
Vue.js. Yeah, the Vue profile.
As I recall, there was a tweet this morning, right? Or was it yesterday about the Vue.js? What is it? A getting started guide?
So can you elaborate about the profile, Zach?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, back on the Grails front, we put together a profile for a new JavaScript framework, because there's always has to be a new JavaScript framework every week. And so this one's called Vue.js. And honestly, I think at this point it should be considered one of the big three of the modern front end frameworks. The other two being obviously React and Angular. Vue.js is right up there with them. It's much newer, but adoption is going kind of through the roof. Well, I shouldn't say adoption, but interest is going through the roof. People are really excited about it. So we put together a profile. It really is modeled exactly after the React and Angular profiles we already have. So it's a multi-project build, Grails REST API backend with a front-end project using the Vue CLI, the native tooling. It's all wired together with Gradle, so you don't have to install npm. You can run everything via Gradle if that's your thing. And so that profile went out with version 3.3.3 of Grails. And we've also just put out a couple of Grails guides on using the profile and how to build a Vue.js app with Grails. So it's a cool framework. I encourage folks to check it out, play with it. And if you use either go to start.grails.org and download a project with the Vue profile, or create it from the command line, and it'll work just like you'd expect. You'll get a Grailsy looking front end, but it's all implemented in Vue with a REST API backing it up.
Wonderful. That sounds very productive, and I agree with you. My experience, at any rate, for what it's worth, is that also Vue is acquiring a lot of adherence very, very quickly. It does seem to be the framework of the month in the JavaScript MVC community, if you will.
Exactly. I'm hopeful it'll end up having more staying power than that. But yeah, we'll see.
Yes, absolutely. So Sergio, now, of course, I assume you are one of the core people working on the new Micronaut framework. Is that correct?
I am working a little bit. I would not call myself a core developer in the framework, but I am working a little bit. Many of us work in several fronts. So I do client work, I do guides coordination, and I write some guides. I am working on Grails. I'm working a little bit on Micronaut. So that's more or less the way we work. Is we are assigned to several tasks, to several fronts. We are working on Micronaut, but I am not working full time on Micronaut.
Okay, if you notice the increased pace, if you notice the increased pace that guides and quick casts and other content have been coming out lately, that's all of Sergio's doing. He's the one that keeps us on track of making sure we have new content coming out for everyone.
Well, it's clear that his name and certainly his presence is all over those guides. I mean, I see that all the time. So we're very grateful for that. That's very helpful, and just for the community itself, and for anyone trying to learn how to work with Grails, especially the latest features, the modern stuff. When did 3.3.3 come out, by the way?
We released it, I believe it was Tuesday before Greach, or 10 days before Greach. I forgot. So it was released just before Greach. So we have done a lot of, actually Punit and Ivan Lopez and also James put a lot of work in fixing bug issues and performance, and many people are using now the multi-tenancy features of Gorm and Grace integration. So we are fixing some problems that the people are encountering while using those on the real world. So the latest release has a ton of improvements, so I encourage everyone to upgrade to that. And that was released just before Greach. So that's the latest, the stable and the recommended version.
Now you mentioned Puneet Bell, right? Who is based in India. I think he's in the Delhi area. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Puneet has been a long-time contributor to Grails in the area of upgrading plugins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And recently joined OCI within the last year. I don't remember exactly when.
I believe he joined on January or February. I believe January. He has been doing a great job in fixing bugs in Grails in general. But as you say, if you are using plugins, you probably are using plugins for which Puneet has contributed. He has upgraded many Grails to plugins to Grails 3.
I've certainly been fortunate enough to see his work in action, and it's been excellent. Now, of course, you also mentioned James. How do you pronounce his last name? Is it Klee or Clay?
Klee.
Klee. K-L-L or K-L-E-E-H, I think it is. I know that he recently did another OCI webinar on the GraphQL support, and I finally learned that GraphQL has absolutely nothing to do with graph databases. It's simply an alternative to a REST API. He made it sound very, very interesting. So he did I'm sure recordings of that webinar are still available.
Yeah, we have them in our YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/subject computing, or if you go to grace.org and scroll towards the footer of the page, we have like a YouTube icon, which will bring you to our YouTube channel. We have several playlists. One of them is called the OCI webinars. So we have like the GraphQL webinar is there, the JEP webinar with Marcin that we talked before is there as well. All the Grace Quickcast are there. So we are creating some video content. Video content is, as you are very aware of, Ken, is time consuming to record. So we are creating that content, but that's going in a slower pace than the guides content.
Still, although you also mentioned, I was going to segue from this also, you said you did a Grails security presentation at Greach. I got an email. Isn't OCI doing a webinar on Grails security based on Spring Security sometime in May? I think it is.
I am. So I am actually the teacher of that webinar. So we are doing like 3 1-hour webinars, introductions and to several topics. And then we are doing at a really low price, like 6-hour workshops. So one of them is going to be security. James Klee is going to do a GraphQL workshop also. So we have links to those directly from grace.org. But yeah, we are trying to create. We have received the feedback that we have users all around the world. And online training is probably the training that works best for them. So we are trying to do more of that, especially around the latest features such as GraphQL or important topics such as security.
Well, that's very helpful to me at any rate. I certainly enjoy a lot of that. All right, so the biggest announcement, of course, and OCI was at Greach in force, did this giant announcement regarding this new micro framework that has been designed to create microservices. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It's a new framework for designing and building microservices known as Micronaut. So who wants to say something about that?
So basically, it was really nice to be in Greach for the announcement because there was, so we already knew that was coming, and we were really excited about. I was in Greach, instead of having, they had a Groovy keynote first thing in the morning, and then they had the Micronaut announcement, the last talk of the day. And people, I don't think people saw that coming. So people were really surprised, and the feeling and the feedback of the people was really really nice. We were really glad about that. So basically, Graham, who has carried most of the development of the new framework, which is also really nice. So one of the big selling points is that the same guy who delivered Grace 10 years ago and has all these lessons learned during all these years is the guy responsible of the new framework. So he delivered he introduced the framework, he demoed the framework, he highlighted some of the features. He could not cover all the features because there was no time enough in 45 minute talk, and then the people were pretty surprised. And the following day, Alvaro Sanchez, another guy from OCI, did another talk about Micronaut with more code samples, and that talk was packed. Absolutely. So a lot of people who were in the talk the day before were really excited about that, and that's all there is to say from the announcement point of view. A big excitement, really.
Well, let's say something about the technical side of Micronaut. So, of course, the biggest selling point now, of course, I'm only getting this secondhand. I wasn't at Greach, so I was just getting what I saw on Twitter. I did breeze through some of your slides that you wound up posting. So it looks like the biggest selling point of Micronaut is its size and speed.
Hard to say the biggest selling point. So the biggest selling point is so everything is done at compile time. So Micronaut comes with dependency injection and AOP also. All of that is done at compile time, so that really breaks the. Normally, when you use reflection, the more lines of code you have in your project, the slower startup time and memory consumption is going to be. Because in order to support dependency injection and AOP, the framework needs to basically read every file, every .class basically. So in Micronaut, everything is done at compile time. Actually, I don't think we have any reflection at all in the framework. So the memory consumption and the startup time are incredibly fast. So they are like sub-seconds. You mentioned before about Groovy. So you were worried about what's the status of Groovy and Micronaut. So Groovy is a first citizen in Micronaut. So there is complete parity with Java. So Micronaut is available for Groovy, Java, and even Kotlin. And there is also some benefits about using Groovy. So there is like a runtime. So that we have like a dependency if you want to use Groovy with a couple of extra features. So I personally will use Micronaut with Groovy. Obviously, being able to support Java opens a bigger audience to the framework. But Groovy is in our focus. I mean, we are building many samples applications with Groovy. We probably will put a lot of documentation outside with Groovy. And I personally will encourage people to use Micronaut with Groovy. So I don't think, I think from a Groovy point of view, a new framework which allows you to use Groovy as a first citizen is good news. What else? Biggest selling points is, for example, the framework due to the low memory footprint is capable of running. You can run a Micronaut application in Amazon Lambda, for example. So it's flexible for serverless applications. We have managed to get the dependency injection working on Android. So I know you have played a lot with Android, so you probably are aware of Dagger for dependency injection. So Micronaut will be an alternative there as a dependency injection component for Android. And also, most of the features are targeting the microservices world. So you will get out-of-the-box service discovery. You will get things like circuit breaker. You will get an annotation, for example, which is at fallback, which will replace in case you have any bin down. You get also an HTTP client similar to Retrofit that I know you are aware of and you love Retrofit. So normally if you work with Retrofit, you will use Retrofit and you will use Mozi to get like the JSON payload and inflate Java objects. So in Micronaut, that's not longer necessary because the HTTP client works in a similar way. You define an interface, and at compile time, Micronaut will give you the implementation for the HTTP client and will give you the binding to the response object that you wish to obtain. We get also an HTTP server as well, if you wish to use the HTTP server part of Micronaut, which is based on Netty, RX Java 2, and all the reactive part is for citizens, and we are encouraging that. And yeah, I don't know if I have missed anything. Zach, if I have missed anything, please jump in.
Yeah, I don't think you've missed anything. And it is quite impressive how modular really Micronaut is. There are a number of pieces of Micronaut that will make sense in an Android context, even a Grails application or a Spring Boot application. It would be very much incorrect to think of Micronaut as being a replacement for Grails. It really is something quite new, quite different, and that Grails developers will, I think, be able to take advantage of even in their existing applications. It's not going to be the case where if you have a Grails app, you're going to be expected to and we wouldn't even call it an upgrade. It would be a migration really to Micronaut. There will very well likely be pieces of Micronaut that you will want to use in your Grails application. And we've been working on that just internally right now, doing some demos of seeing how the integration can go, and it's quite exciting. I think there'll be some real treats for Grails developers on existing versions of Grails and Spring Boot when Micronaut comes out. It's not going to be something where if you want to use it, you're going to have to rewrite your application or abandon your preferred framework at all. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for integration.
Okay, well, there's a couple of things out of that kind of jumped out at me. One is, of course, the idea of the dependency injection framework. You're right. There's Dagger on Android, which is, I will say, common, if not necessarily popular. You know what I mean? Everybody does seem to use it. Nobody really seems to be all that thrilled with it. I've always found it to be a weak copy, if you will, of Spring, which was, of course, the most popular dependency injection framework around. And then, of course, Spring Boot is underlying Grails 3 and everything going forward. Are you saying that you wrote your own dependency injection framework as something very different from anything provided by Spring or Dagger, or I suppose Google Juice would be the other major one?
All dependency injection in Micronaut is done at compile time. So that's the biggest difference with Spring. We don't want to reinvent things that are working fine. So Spring has done really wonderful things for the development in desktop and dependency injection. So if you use Micronaut, you will find similar patterns for many things. So the biggest selling point for using, if you like a Spring dependency injection, you will probably find a Micronaut dependency injection pattern familiar, and you will get the benefit that everything is done at compile time. But from a dependency injection point of view, I mean, you will get so you get the dependency injection. You can inject your dependencies in the constructor. You can inject your dependencies with @inject. You can use the get dependencies with qualifier, @qualifier. So all these dependency use cases that you are used to, those you will have them in Micronaut. So I think in the Android world, you will find, I personally like more than Dagger. In the web application world, if you have worked with Spring, you will have no problem catching up with how dependency injection works in Micronaut.
But you're saying that you're not using Spring's dependency injection. You wrote your own. Is that a reasonable?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Micronaut doesn't depend on the Spring.
Yeah, Spring is all done at compile time too. Of course, they just use aspect-oriented programming. They use AOP. You're saying that you're doing everything at compile time as well. Is that also based on AOP, or is something different?
As far as I understand, Spring does a lot of things at runtime.
Oh, okay. I understand it does things when you start up. Anyway, those are just technical details. When does the framework become available? Because one of the somewhat controversial things that happened regarding Micronaut was that there were several demos, but there was no actual code available or ability to work with any of these samples or anything like that. This was all. It felt like a big teaser, really, for the launch of the framework. So what's the schedule on that now?
We are targeting Q2 for the first milestones. I think it was more a Twitter controversy than any other problem. So I think everyone who attended Greach was happy to see the demos and see the code. Everyone who was there, I don't know if we probably didn't convey the message properly, but obviously we still need to do some work to finish the framework, especially in the documentation part of the framework. So we don't want to open milestones with poor documentation. So there is a lot of work done from a technical point of view, but we want to have a documentation really to ease the learning curve. So until we are ready there, we will not be able to release the milestones releases.
Well, controversy is a strong term. I mean, as you say, it was probably everything on Twitter is a controversy, right? Just almost by definition. But I would say that there was a lot of eagerness. There was a lot of impatience, if you will, to see.
We are excited as well, but we are still finishing some details.
Yeah, I think it's understandable that there'd be some angst over having an announcement before there's any code available for people to get their hands on. We definitely understand that. I think the calculus is that the folks at Greach and elsewhere would rather know that something new is coming and have an idea of what kind of capabilities that we're looking at providing. And like Sergio said, we really do want to make sure that we hit the ground running as far as documentation and content stuff for the Grails community, having integration options available. Right now there's some cool stuff going on, but a lot of it is kind of head knowledge. And if you don't know what's available, it won't be quite as compelling or quite as approachable. So we really want to make sure that we have a lot of resources available at the same time when people actually start to access the code and make stuff.
So the statement is that there'll be milestones in the second quarter of this year. Any tentative plan for the actual release date? Do you have any idea when that will be?
I don't think we have any official release date. So basically what we want to achieve is get the software on hands of people using really microservice to the limit. Get feedback from those, then go back to the drawing board, solve the issues that they may find, and then we will be ready for a final release. I mean, it's pretty stable right now. So I have been using Search in Groovy Calamari is a Micronaut application for the past 6 months. So you can build the stuff already. So I think people will be able to build cool solutions with the milestone releases. But before calling a stable release, we will need some time.
Okay, well, of course, the Groovy ecosystem already has another framework specifically designed for building microservices, and of course that would be Ratpack. Can you contrast or say anything to compare Micronaut with Ratpack? I mean, how do those two relate to each other? Is there pros and cons for Micronaut over Ratpack as well?
So I am not an expert on Ratpack, so apologies to the Ratpack users so who may don't like my comments, or my comments are not accurate. As far as I understand, so Ratpack is a wonderful solution because it also achieves really low memory consumption and really high throughput as well. Also, the solution is based on NETI as well.
Right.
So when Micronaut will give you will give you more solutions out of the box. So if you use Ratpack, you will need to decide. So Ratpack will give you it's probably less opinionated, so you will not have a dependency injection solution out of the box. So you will need to use Google Use or something like that. You will, if you want to use a security solution, you probably need to bake yourself a Pack4j or something like that. So we'll have a solution out of the box in Micronaut. So it probably is the programming model. So will be more common to Grails users and to Ratpack users. So Ratpack users will be it's like everything is more open, so it's more like a flexible solution, and Micronaut will be more like a full stack framework where we aim to give you more or less out of the box solutions for all the more important challenges in a Ratpack in a microservices application. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It's a start. I mean, it's hard to judge. Again, I don't know that anybody who works on Ratpack has worked with Micronaut yet. I don't know that the people working on Micronaut have that much experience with Ratpack. I don't know right yet. And again, we're still talking about betaware at best. I mean, it's not vaporware. Obviously, it exists, and obviously people have been doing demos on it. And that's very interesting to know, by the way, that Groovy Calamari has been a Micronaut application for quite some time, right? So that's all good. It's just very hard to really see how all these things fit into the ecosystem when we don't really have anything to use at the moment. That's all. So I know you're going to be talking about this again at GreatConf in Europe. That's what's that, May 30th and June 1st, that time frame. Is OCI planning a big presence there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I believe, if I am not mistaken, Alvaro will do a Micronaut workshop. I believe Zach will travel as well to Europe.
Oh, you're headed to GreatConf?
Yep, I'll be there. Alvaro will be there. Excuse me, I believe Paul King, Ryan Vanderwerf, and Graham are going to be there as well.
So I'm sure there'll be an update. If not, I mean, by then, hopefully we'll have at least a milestone or two.
Stay tuned. Yeah, I think people will be pretty happy.
Okay, well, Zach, I know you have a lot of experience with Grails. Okay, what sort of problem? I mean, I've been telling people for quite some time that Grails is not your predecessor's Grails version anymore. You know, if you learned Grails 5-10 years ago, and you learned what it was, and it was very well suited to the classical problem of building a Spring Hibernate type of large application with lots and lots of features. And I like to tell people nowadays you can use, for example, the REST API profile, or as you mentioned earlier, Angular, React, or Vue profiles to build applications that way. And I've been telling people that, you don't have to build a traditional monolithic application anymore. You could go ahead and just build a small micro web service, if you will, in Grails. And now along comes Micronaut, and now I'm not sure what to recommend. So when do you recommend Grails as opposed to Micronaut? You say there's no conflict there, but I gotta admit, I just don't understand. I admit I don't know enough about it to know. So please help me understand, when would I use Grails as opposed to when would I use Micronaut?
Yeah, those are all excellent questions, and they're definitely things that we're anticipating that, people are going to be wondering. And so and it is hard when there's no code and we can't show you exactly
Right.
how it all fit together. But I think that, I still speak on Grails. I'm still going to tell people that Grails is an excellent fit for a lot of web applications, including microservice ones. If you're considering building a microservice architecture and using Spring Boot, then you should consider using Grails. You pretty much have nothing but to gain, right? Because Grails adds additional power, additional features to what Spring Boot already offers. What we're finding out, though, is that there are people who and sometimes it's ironic because people will tell us that, well, Grails was too heavy for our microservices, and so we moved to Spring Boot, which is not really a large change. They're very comparable. Grails is a little bit larger, as Graham mentioned at his keynote at Greach, because we do have a little extra magic that we're doing. But nonetheless, you're basically talking about the same class of an application, the memory footprint, the startup time. And if those are not concerns, then Grails is an excellent choice. And it's not, it's really not a shortcoming of the framework so much as just a change in how people are trying to use the framework. And we've definitely done a lot through profiles and such to slim down Grails and make it more suitable for a microservice architecture. And I still think there's going to be plenty of cases where it's still a great solution. And the thinking behind Micronaut is that Grails and Spring Boot and Spring in general were not designed for this kind of architecture. They've been adapted, they can be used, and they still have a lot to offer. But the thought was, what could we do with the lessons we've learned from these developer productivity focused kind of frameworks that we all like and love? And if we could take those sorts of lessons, but design something that was from the ground up intended to be used in a microservice environment, of what could we actually do? How much better could it be? And as far as things like memory usage and startup time, and the ability to just instantly, effectively spin up multiple instances of your application or your service without needing to wait for a lot of runtime and startup time, wiring and setup being done. And what I think what's gonna happen, especially because the integration between Micronaut and Grails is looking to be, I don't know if seamless is the right word, but it's looking to be really compelling, is that people will find that it makes sense to have an existing Grails application and to start splitting out or adding new services that are based on Micronaut and integrating those with their Grails application. And those things will use less memory, less resources. They'll be easier to start up and shut down as needed. As Sergio hinted at, things like service discovery and load balancing are built into Micronaut. You can do all that in Grails, you can do all that in Spring Boot, but Micronaut assumes you're going to be using that. A Micronaut project or Micronaut application is designed with the assumption, if you will, that you're going to have more, that it's going to be talking to other players in a larger system. Grails and Spring Boot still more or less assume that they are the be-all, end-all as far as when you create a project. It's full stack and it gives you what you need to make an application. Obviously, there's nothing stopping you from creating multiple applications and communicating between the two. But with Micronaut, that is a first-class design pattern, right? That is the way you're intended to build applications. And having worked on some of the internal stuff we're doing with Micronaut, first particle, now Micronaut, it really is a refreshing way of doing microservice development, because there's such low friction between the communication between these microservices. And you can see some hints of that, I believe, in some of the slides that have been reproduced. It's just so easy to create a new service and register it with your service discovery server, and use the correct annotations, and all of a sudden you're calling methods that don't exist on your service, but they exist in the other guys. And you'll be able to do that with Grails from within Grails as well, working with services that are based on Micronaut. So, like I said earlier, I don't think there's going to be a lot, unless you're already considering leaving Grails, like your Grails out, you have a monolith, or you have an architecture based on Grails, and it's becoming too unwieldy for you, and you want to move to something more modular, not modular, more lightweight. And if you're already considering leaving Grails, then migrating to Micronaut's going to make sense. If you have an older version of Grails, maybe you'll consider doing that. But I think a lot of folks are going to keep their Grails, especially Grails 3 on up applications, and add new features and new functionality using Micronaut services. And of course, we'll have to see how this all plays out and what people actually want to do. I don't want to forecast too much, but like I said earlier, there's going to be parts of Micronaut that are going to make a lot of sense to use in Grails. And I don't think that Grails users have anything to fear as far as Micronaut becoming, overshadowing the Grails framework. It may overshadow it as far as excitement because it's the cool new thing, but definitely not as far as our commitment to developing both frameworks and making sure that the integration is really smooth and really powerful. So as far as how it's all going to fit together and with Rat-Pack and other things, I mean, time will tell. But I think Micronaut it's aimed at a broader spectrum of users and use cases than Grails or Spring Boot were. So I think it'll be really exciting to see. I think there'll be a lot of things right now where people are doing serverless applications and cloud functions and things along those lines. To be able to have a dependency injection and AOP and these other kind of advanced concepts that we've come to know and love in Grails and in Spring, to be able to do those in a completely different kind of and a much smaller environment, I think is going to open up a lot of cool possibilities.
All right. Well, I suspect that we're going to be revisiting those questions several times in the next few months. Right. So we have a preliminary idea of what things are going to look like, or at least you have a much better idea since you've gotten a chance to play with it. But I hear what you're saying. I don't know what it all means necessarily, but as these things start to be released and we get a chance to play with them, we'll see. Now, of course, the big question that I don't know that anybody can predict right now is how the marketplace is going to respond to this, how the perception will go. My hope is that no one will view the creation of Micronaut as an implicit criticism of Grails. You know what I mean? That there will be enough room for both, and that people will still have faith that Grails has a bright future and will continue to grow and be supported. And I know that everybody at OCI is saying that. The question is how well that message will come through. And I guess we won't know until we let this play out over the next few months. I will say, though, that there's certainly a lot of excitement around the new framework. There's a lot of interest. But the fact that OCI is still producing webinars and producing getting started guides and is working on the framework itself shows that Grails is still clearly a part of the overall mission and in the plan, certainly. By the way, any rough idea? Do you have any idea when Grails 4 is supposed to come out? Is there any clue on that yet, or is that still too early to say?
I believe it's a bit too early to say. So I know James is working on some of those parts, but that's a bit early to say.
Well, the only reason I ask is because Spring has now versioned to Spring 5 and Spring Boot version to 2.0 about a month ago. And yep. Those are both the first time that Spring has required a move to Java SE8, of course, which seems funny given that we're now supposedly on 10, on Java 10 now.
This is crazy.
So the question will be in the marketplace, if you are naturally thinking of Spring and Spring Boot, and the argument is that Grails is all that and more, when will Grails support Spring 5, Spring Boot 2? And my understanding is that that's part of Grails 4. So whenever that is scheduled to roll out, that's when we'll have a story again. I just hate to be in that intermediate area where people are saying, well, Grails seems to be behind that, I guess we'll see.
Grails 4 will have Java 8 as a minimum. It will have Spring Boot 2 and Spring 5, and it will ship with Corm 7, which will require, if you are using the Hibernate implementation, will require a Hibernate 5.2.
Mm-hmm.
Which will bring a set of breaking changes on its own, which I really don't know much, but I know the Hibernate guys are doing, they are pushing forward to deprecating some of the old stuff. So that's the plan for Grace 4. We'll probably have also for Grace 4 some of the Micronaut integration that Zach has been commenting into Grace as well. So low-hanging fruit there, for example, will be if you are communicating between two Grace applications, you will probably right now use a network library such as OKHTTP or REST client builder, something like that. You will probably end up using the Micronaut HTTP client. So that will be probably the first thing. The first Micronaut feature Grace users will use will be probably the cool HTTP client that ships with Micronaut.
Well, so as you mentioned, Micronaut has all of these cloud-related features built right into it. The service discovery and the failover, and does it use things like Hystrix and stuff, or did they roll their own on all those features as well?
We have one. So Hystrix is going to be supported. By supported, I mean we are going to do Hystrix integration easier. But right now we already have one baked in circuit breaker pattern. So you will have like if I recall correctly, the annotation is called circuit break. So you can basically, do more or less. I mean, Hystrix is more full-fledged, but the idea of the circuit breaker pattern is baked into the framework as well.
All right. Well, we're going to need to. Oh, one last thing I had to ask you technically: is the minimum SDK on Java for Micronaut, is that SE8?
Yeah.
Okay, so that one already has required Java SE8 on that. Okay, good to know. We do have to wrap up a little. Let me do a chance to say something about Groovy Calamari, of course, because that's always one of our primary resources when putting together news items for the Groovy Podcast. So can you say something about Groovy Calamari?
Yeah, absolutely. Subscribe. groovycalamari.com. It's a weekly email full of links. So I have been reading in the last year much more about microservices. So I have been actually including some links to microservices stuff, especially security lately. So you can wait. You can probably expect from Groovy Calamari to have more microservices leaks into the content. You will find a lot of Grace content as well. So we have been linking to the Grace guides. Yesterday I sent an issue with several nice talks that I attended at Greach. So I attended a Grace G-string talks by Jacob. So believe it or not, Jacob did a G-string talk of 45 minutes. So I was joking before the talk with another guy, like it's impossible that he managed to cover 45 minutes, but actually he delivered an awesome talk. I learned a couple of tricks to work with GX strings, which is still amazing. How Groovy, after working several years with Groovy, you always discover a new method. And I attended also a really nice security workshop by Jacob too. So I linked to those. I probably will link to more Greach content in the upcoming weeks. Yeah, that's subscribe, groovycalamari.com.
I did notice that the newsletter showed up yesterday, as you said, and you do have that link to an entire 45-minute talk on Groovy strings. I still can't imagine what he did in that. I take on your word that it was really fascinating. So I'm looking forward to seeing the recording there and finding out what in the world do you say for 45 minutes about Groovy strings other than, well, just put a $sign in it, but okay. Looking forward to that. Zach, is there anything you wanted to mention about things upcoming in the future? Anything you're going to be doing or where you're going to be presenting, anything like that?
Sure. So yeah, we mentioned already, I'm speaking at GreatConf EU. I'll be talking pretty much about JavaScript-y things. So I have a talk on Vue.js and the integration with Grails, and a workshop on Grails and React. So yeah, just back on the Grails front, that's kind of my quote specialty area, his front end stuff. and how to integrate and how to handle deployments and things like that. So check out the Grails guides, guides.grails.org. We just put a new one out on building a app with Vue.js and Grails. As well as we mentioned GraphQL earlier, and I've written a guide on using GraphQL with Grails and with React. So yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff ahead for Grails. I'm still my framework of choice, and I still enjoy it, and I'm really happy to get to work on it.
Well, thank you both for making time to talk with us today. It's always an adventure arranging an intercontinental hangout like this. People that are, I think between the two of you, you're at least 6 time zones apart. Is that right? Yeah,
I think it's about right.
Between Madrid and St. Louis. I will hopefully be able to see you. I'm coming out to St. Louis myself for the No Fluff Just Stuff conference.
Yeah.
And my plan, I just actually changed my flight, believe it or not, so I can come out a day early so I can drop by the OCI offices. So I'll get a chance to actually visit there for the first time in early April.
Let us know, and I'll make sure I'm there.
Well, I told Jeff about it. So
okay.
Hopefully I'll see him. From what I understand, Graham will be in town that weekend as well. So I'll get hammered from all sides again on everything going on at OCI. So I think you're both doing wonderful work and great contributions to the community and the industry as a whole. So once again, thank you very much for coming, and good luck with both Grails-related things and, of course, the Micronaut launch and information there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for having us on.
Okay, take care.